All right, man, peace. So, brother, Stephen A. Smith is going to make quite a revelation pertaining to the goings-on between Mr. LeBron James and Mr. Anthony Davis. A revelation which none of us should be surprised about, because from the moment that Anthony Davis declared that he had signed with Clutch Sports and Mr. Rich Paul, who is his official agent, really just acting in interest of LeBron James, we've known that the fix was in. Now, Stephen A. Smith is going to confirm this. So, of course, they're going to talk about it, and I'm going to chime in.
Hey guys, we need to get back to what we were discussing earlier, what's going on in the association. So here's the deal. The NBA hit Anthony Davis with a $50,000 fine after he said he won't sign an extension with the team and wants to be traded. Now, multiple league sources expect his camp to soon say that Davis' preferred destination is the Los Angeles Lakers, and he'll become a rental player until 2020 with a trade anywhere else.
Of course, that's coming from Mr. Rich Paul. Rich Paul and LeBron James have been controlling the situation, this narrative, for the duration. There's no doubt about that at all. Anthony Davis has been playing the willing pawn since last summer. And it's really kind of shameful because he's been very disingenuous with his teammates, his coaching staff, and the front office.
Stephen A., how much is LeBron to blame for all of this?
Well, of course, LeBron James is predominantly who you would quote-unquote blame. But I'm not quite sure if I would use that term blame, because Anthony Davis is a grown man. If you're a grown man, you allow yourself to be pawned and manipulated. You have two types of people in this world. You have pimps and you have hoes, metaphorically speaking. A pimp manipulates and exerts control. A hoe allows himself to be manipulated and allows themselves to have control exerted upon them. And a lot of times people like being hoes. People don't like to have control over their life because they feel like it's too much pressure. Anthony Davis comes off to me as one of those people who does not want to have too much control over his own life. LeBron James is someone who probably believes that he can never have enough control over his own life. People, for the most part, are sheep, and you're going to encounter that mindset in various walks of life. Anthony Davis is a player who I'm on record as stating understands that he's not an alpha. Meaning what? He's not someone who's going to lead a team to a championship. And maybe he should be congratulated for his level of self-awareness. He wants somebody to play under. He wants to be on a team where he's not expected to be the lead guy. Because I know for a fact that he grasps that he's not good enough to lead a team to a championship in this era. That has to be the case because he wants to go play with LeBron James. He knows that he's not going to be the leader there. So what he's hoping is that when he gets traded to the Lakers, or should he get traded to the Lakers, that the Lakers will be able to win one championship. And by the time LeBron is gone, he'll be about 29, 30 years old, and he can always hang his hat on that one championship and try to lead the Lakers into deep playoff runs for the remainder of his career.
From what I'm hearing, he has some culpability in all of this.
You mean all the culpability, Stephen A. Smith? Knock it off.
Because apparently Kawhi Leonard, Klay Thompson, Kevin Durant, and others were never a part of the equation as it pertained to LeBron James.
Allegedly. Now that LeBron James and Rich Paul know that none of those superstar players want to play with him, they're trying to put out the narrative that they were never in LeBron's plan anyway. It was always about Anthony Davis. In reality, LeBron James assessed the situation. He looked at various players, their skill set, what they would bring to the table, and he also assessed their personality type. And he quickly realized that Anthony Davis is the only superstar player in the NBA who is in awe of him. All these other players are not in awe of him. So that's who he zoned in on. He's a pimp who zoned in on his hoe.
Joining LeBron James in LA. From what I'm being told, LeBron James, it's not about Rich Paul, it's not about anybody else. LeBron James has personally spoken to Anthony Davis dating back to this summer.
Now that is tampering. That is collusion. And the NBA owners have a right to be upset about that.
Talking to him about the possibility of being in LA and all
game recognized game.
All that.
Cultural Marxist Marx, aka Max Kellerman, at it again. Once again, I have no idea why the NBA would allow a player to be even indirectly involved with an agency. That, of course, is a conflict of interest, or at least that is what it should be considered, a conflict of interest. To have a player as powerful as LeBron James, who runs a sports agency via proxy, aka via Rich Paul.
And all that it entails. movies, endorsement deals, etc., etc. LeBron James has made this pitch. That had a lot to do with why Anthony Davis ended up being with Rich Paul. Do I know this to be true? No. I'm sure there are people in Rich Paul's camp and beyond who would deny this. And I don't know because I wasn't an eyewitness to it. But from what I have been told, LeBron James himself was communicating directly with Anthony Davis.
Of course that's the case. Keep in mind, Stephen A. Smith is the same person who stated prior to the season that LeBron James was sending text messages to Kevin Durant asking him if he will be interested in signing with the Los Angeles Lakers. Now Stephen A. Smith is putting out a lot of the smoke screen from the LeBron James camp that they were quote-unquote never interested in KD in the first place. All that is bullshit. They put their tentacles out to all of these players, that being KD, Klay Thompson, Kawhi. Now they're trying to put their tentacles out to Kyrie because LeBron James is desperate. But he does not want to make it look like he's desperate. So the only player that he wants to willingly acknowledge that he's reached out to is Anthony Davis, because Anthony Davis is the only player who has been receptive to his reaching out.
This previous offseason, which ultimately led to Anthony Davis signing on with Clutch Sports, Rich Paul, which obviously LeBron has a stake in, and as a result, that benefits all parties concerned. So in that regard, there is a level of culpability. But here's where it gets deep. And let me say this, Max, and then the floor is yours. I go back to LeBron James leaving for Miami. He earned the right to do what he wants. Any superstar that's in that position once they become a free agent has earned the right to do what they want.
Agreed.
Even though LeBron James may have handled the PR of it all wrong, the bottom line is he did nothing wrong. But when you are in that position and you have that level of power, and you think about just yourself in terms of how you want to speak on the matter, sometimes you miss the residual impact that it may have on others coming down the line.
Or you just don't care because you understand that you're in a position of power that other people are not. And with great power not only comes great responsibility, but also comes great prestige and a greater amount of options. So I don't really look at it as LeBron James's job to worry about the power that he has to wield and how it's going to affect everybody else. His attitude is, I'm digging a new tunnel to freedom for you guys. Either you have the insight and the foresight to follow me through this tunnel or you don't. I'm not worrying about how me digging this tunnel is going to affect you.
Yeah, Anthony Davis don't have so much to worry about. Sure, fine, so be it. But you under contract. Now you got teams collaborating with the New Orleans Pelicans to help ensure that they won't be cooperative in getting him to the Lakers because they don't want Anthony Davis and other stars under contract having that kind of influence.
Absolutely. That's going to be a domino effect if you have a superstar player. And you just can't have that. Back in the day, if a superstar player was struggling on a certain franchise, their attitude was, we have to work on getting better. Now they sign a 5-year contract, and in year 3, they're going to start begging for a trade. I mean, it's ridiculous. Give me a break.
Was the NBA hands down a $50,000 fine to a player because you publicized what your intent was, which was in violation of collective bargaining rules? Why would they suddenly do that? Because teams were calling and saying, you need to do something about this, NBA. So what you have is a situation where we have powerful, influential athletes, particularly of African American descent, who have earned the right to do what they want in LeBron's case, but not necessarily the other guys who are still under contract trying to force their way out of situations they no longer want to be in. It has raised the antennas of owners and executives throughout the league. It's put a bullseye, a target on their back, and as a result, it's making it difficult for them to make the kind of moves that ultimately that usually would be easier.
Let me say this very quickly. Stephen A. Smith injected some race aspect into this discussion. I'm not quite sure in this situation per se that is particularly relevant. Right now, to me, it's all about the integrity that you have when you sign a contract. It's not so much about your race. I do understand that from an extended point of view, with the so-called black man representing the vast majority of players in the NBA and the Caucasian man representing the vast majority of owners, there's always going to be a race dynamic. But if you're not a man of your word, if you're going to break your contract or try to break your contract, It does not particularly matter whether you're so-called black or so-called Caucasian or Hispanic or Asian in this situation. This is something that the owners should be concerned with, and they should be trying to stem the tide on this, because you have a nationwide business, that being the NBA. And if the common perception, if you live in Minnesota and you root for the Timberwolves, or you live in Cleveland and you root for the Cavaliers, or you live in Indiana and you root for the Pacers, is that if we have a great player, he's going to leave and try to go to the Lakers. That's not good for public perception for the league.
That ultimately brings us back to LeBron, because LeBron is clearly an iconic figure and arguably the most influential athlete we have seen in the modern era. The problem was in doing things the way in which he did it. No malintent whatsoever, just exercising his right as a human being, as a black man who's successful, business savvy, a savant. His brilliance can't be questioned. You were thinking about you. And in the end, the residual impact that it has on others, you might have missed that. And now you got billionaires and the people who work under them, along with leagues, coming for them.
Stephen A. Smith is trying to turn this into a dire situation. All of the participants in the NBA are millionaires. All of them. From the guy at the very front of the bench to the guy at the very end of the bench. So there are no losers here. If the worst thing that happens is that the NBA enacts a bylaw that states that you're not allowed to demand a trade based on the length of years that you signed or so on and so forth, nobody's going to lose any sleep.
Just to let them know, you don't run us. It's going to be the other way around. And that kind of confrontation is something we need to keep our eyes on in the weeks, the months, and the years to come.
I agree. Once again, the owners should be considering some type of bylaw or corollary to their rule book, which states that the NBA players are not allowed to try to instigate a trade on their own unless they played a certain amount of years in their contract, especially with more than a year left in their contract. I mean, it's just ridiculous. If you're going to sign a contract, be a man of your word.
It's a very influential book written decades ago by Marshall McLuhan called The Medium is the Massage, or the Message, meaning that the way you present something actually is the message of the thing. And LeBron could have done a better job, I think, packaging some of his messages, because that became the message to many. Right. I don't have a problem with it, but apparently the owners do. By the way, I want to focus in on the Lakers here. Sure. Same thing with the Lakers. Dr. Jerry Buss, the late great Dr. Jerry Buss, the greatest owner by far in the history of American team sports, won more than anyone else. Turned the Lakers from a distant second behind the Celtics to a far and away first in the modern era. 10 championships to 4 Lakers to Celtics. And he did it without making people hate him. Somehow the Lakers always got their guy. They always had Shaq and everybody else. And somehow all those Lakers, but no one tried to thwart Dr. Jerry Buss, because the medium was the message. He did it and made people feel good. He wasn't arrogant.
No, not quite. You're trying to re-engineer history. Many teams would have liked to have been able to thwart Dr. Jerry Buss back in the day, but they did not have the media outlets that we have today. They did not have the way to express themselves like how owners and agents and general managers have today. But I'm sure that teams were not happy that the Lakers won the championship in 1982, and then the next year they get to draft James Worthy #1 overall. I'm sure they didn't like how the Lakers had 4 #1 overall draft picks in their starting lineup in 1987, with Magic Johnson, Kareem, James Worthy, and Michael Thompson. The Lakers were a stacked team back then. So it was a little bit more skewed towards the ownership back then. Now I think that the players are trying to bring a little bit too much chaos. You have to have stability. You have to have a stable medium somewhere. And do I believe that superstar players should be able to try to force trades when they have a year and a half left just because they're not particularly happy in a situation? No, I do not. Play out your contract. I'm sure that certain brothers are not going to like that. Once again, they'll say, well, how come owners can trade players? Yes, owners can trade players because once you sign that contract, you give them the ability to do so. To me, the problem is not even so much with the players, it's with the owners. Once you capitulate to a paradigm like that, that opens up a Pandora's box. The way in which the owner of the New Orleans Pelicans was speaking, I believe she also owns the New Orleans Saints. She said, well, if Anthony's not happy here, we have to let him go. That tells me that she's had some conversations with Adam Silver. And she's been promised that she's going to be thoroughly compensated in some way, shape, or form if she agrees to the trade.
and the Buss family lost that. I think Genie is trying to get that back now, and I want to focus in on how that affects this.
Sure.
LeBron James, Anthony Davis, whomever, I said it earlier in the show, the way the CBA is structured, if you're a max contract player, you're the greatest whoever did it, basically, in your chosen profession, which is incredibly competitive, NBA basketball, you have to stay in the same market, which you did not choose, for 7 years before you can really be a free agent, because if you leave before that, you leave money on the table. Now they have it where even if you wait the full 7 years when you leave, you lose $80 million. So, of course, people like Anthony Davis are saying, I'm going to get traded in my 6th year so I can sign the Supermax with the new team, which is where I want to be. Teams are trying to thwart them. Well, we're going to trade you where you don't want to be. You're going to lose the money anyway. And I'm telling you right now, what's going to happen is what happened with Le'Veon Bell. The players know there's too much at stake to budge, and they are not going to budge to send the message to the owners. You can do that, but I want the team to know who's trading for me. That's a 1-year rental. You just empty the cupboards, all those assets. You're only going to have me for a year. I'm going to go to where I want anyway to spite you, to let you know going forward, you can't do this to us. Now,
well, it's very simple to solve that issue. Either the team that the superstar is already on does not trade him, and they're willing to bite the bullet, because 999 times out of 1,000, if you have a superstar player who wants to be traded away from a certain environment, it's normally going to be on a quote-unquote small market team. If you're a small market team, your attitude should be that the only way that we're going to get good is through the draft anyway. So if this person were to leave, we're not going to be a competitive team that will be vying for a championship for a while as it is. I can't think of too many players who really truly wanted to be traded away from large market teams in the last 10 or 15 years or so, other than Kobe, who wanted to be traded away from the Lakers. Other than that, most of these players who want to be traded away from their team, it normally is a relatively small market team, like Kyrie from Cleveland or Kawhi from San Antonio, now Anthony Davis from New Orleans. Somebody has to bite the bullet and hold the fort, as Greg Popovich would say. And if you choose to not do so, if you choose to move that top-notch asset, the team who receives that top-notch asset, if that player were to say, I'm not going to re-sign with you, no problem, but you will play here. And if you're still not happy by the next trade deadline, I'm just going to trade you again, no problem.
As this relates to LA, quickly, you know why the Lakers would cost however many billions of dollars, but the Bobcats didn't, or the Pelicans didn't? The market matters, and it's okay for players. Is the league really saying it's not okay for you as an individual, Anthony Davis, to decide whether it's the weather or Hollywood or whatever else, that the LA market and the Lakers brand is not only a deciding factor for you, but it becomes the deciding factor?
Right.
If the owners of the Pelicans and the Bobcats don't like it, get your money up and buy the Lakers.
Well,
until then, this is part of the deal.
Right.
No, sir. Actually, all they're saying is that if you sign a contract, to play it out. If you want to go play with the Lakers, wait until your contract has expired and then utilize your free agency rights. And even the crowd does not really know what the hell he's talking about. The crowd had no response to Max Kellerman at all.
Right. But here's the point. Hold on. Here's the important part. You didn't say a word that's wrong. Everything you said is right on the money, and I completely agree with you. But that's emotion. Here's the reality. The reality is that you have a 30-team league. And in a 30-team league, every city ain't the ATL.
Thank you, sir.
Every city ain't South Beach. Every city ain't LA, the Southern California sunshine. There's some Utahs mixed in the mix. Even in New York, there's Madison Square Garden in Midtown, and then there's Brooklyn with the traffic on Atlantic Avenue. Toronto, there's a beautiful city, but damn it, if you ain't got global entry, you got a problem. You understand what I'm saying? So in other words, what I'm saying to you is that when you have 30 teams, it's not a crime for the league itself to sit up there and facilitate a manner in which we say, and I don't even want to get to that point. I know that. I'm going to give it to you. It's the point that I'm trying to make is that their objective is to make sure they created a forum in which everybody can get paid no matter where you are.
Exactly. And they also want to create a mechanism where you could be a small market team and become competitive with large market teams. They're trying to model their overall business paradigm after the NFL to a certain degree. Now they know that the NBA game is much more individualized than the NFL, so they do have to capitulate to the players in some way, shape, or form and allow for more mobility than the NFL would and for more individual brand building. The NBA understands that. but you also have to service your smaller market teams, because if you're not, what's the point of having them?
There's a floor in which you have to spend. So in other words, people can get the max wherever they are. So they did their part. I think that's important to mention. The other part that I want to mention was about LA. Paul George, before he gets traded to Oklahoma City, clearly wanted to go to LA. Everybody knew that. Magic should have gave up players to trade for him. He didn't do that. He wanted to wait till Paul George was a free agent. What happens? Rob Pelinka is under him. Paul George is represented by Aaron Mintz at the time. I think that's his name. Okay? Forget the fact that Paul George, y'all, did not go to Los Angeles. Paul George didn't even give the Lakers an interview. Think about that.
Because how you manage your brand matters.
No, it's because Paul George was happy in OKC, and also he did not want to play with LeBron James. That's why.
What I'm saying is how you manage, yes. So Magic having a GM, and I like Rob Pelinka, respect the hell out of him. I know how Kobe feels about him. Kobe raves about him. But there are enemies that man has, and that's gotten in the way of it too. So we understand the politics, whatever they may be.
I want to respond to your kind of global picture here about the way the NBA manages a 30-team league. If you buy the Pelicans or the Bobcats, you don't have to spend the billions more it takes to buy the Lakers. And yet, you share in revenue that the Lakers generate to a far greater degree than you generate. And in what?
Of course you do. If you're Michael Jackson, you have to pay your background dancers. But the background dancers, we know they're not equal to Michael Jackson. But he has to pay them because they're part of the show. In the NBA, everybody's part of the show, Max Kellerman. You can have as glitzy and as glamorous a franchise as you want in the LA Lakers. But if there's nobody for them to play, what is the point of having them?
In order to keep some kind of sense of competitive balance, players have no choice where they work out of college, the best players in the world, or even...
So what are you saying? Once again, you keep bringing this up. Do you want to get rid of the NBA draft? What would you like, Max Kellerman? Would you like for the players coming out of college to play rock, paper, scissors to determine what team they play for? Is that it? Once again, anybody who's ever played basketball, you know that teams are always picked. So there's always a quote-unquote draft in some way, shape, or form. You go to the rec league, you go to the YMCA, you go to the blacktop out there in the park, you have two captains, the captains pick the teams.
Or even overseas once they enter the draft, and they have to stay there. The NBA keeps them there for between 6 to 7 years. The league is also now saying, if you ever want to choose the market you play in, it's going to cost you $80 million. And the players saying, look, we get it, we need competitive balance, so we're working there for 6 or 7 years where we don't want to be.
Also understand, Max Kellerman, that players today are making much more money per player than they've ever made in the past. So they're thoroughly compensated. The $80 million that you keep railing about, the quote-unquote supermax, that was a functionality that was part of the new collective bargaining agreement. So the players are going to be making more money regardless of where they play.
We understand if we have to leave, we give up money. We understand we didn't choose to go there. We understand that other teams help, like pay share the revenues of the smaller markets, compete. We can have a league. But after 7 years, can we decide where we play without losing $80 million?
Wait a minute. With all due respect, you're tripping, and here's why you're tripping.
Thank you, sir.
Because the fact of the matter is that you're acting like the NBA and everybody else is averse to free agents.
Thank you.
Deciding where they want to go. No, what they're saying is, Anthony Davis, you are under contract.
Thank you, sir.
Until 2020, you signed a contract, agreed to this money, said that you would stay here till 2020, and in 2019 you're trying to force us to send you to LA. They have a right to be averse to that. I'm not saying that if I'm Anthony Davis, I would not have done it. I'm saying the NBA, not the NBA.
You know, but you talk reality.
They have a right to feel about it. You brought up baseball. Baseball, you got to go through the minor leagues before you go to pros. Okay? So what rights do they have against you? Football, they come in. You got to stay in college for at least 2 years before you go to the NFL.
Then players use what they have available to them to exert pressure the other way. Oftentimes you bring up, hey, I agree with everything you're saying philosophically, but here's the reality of the way the world works, right? Well, the players are saying that to the owners too. We understand the letter of the law of the contract, but what we have available to us, Le'Veon Bell, I'll sit out the year to get to free agents.
Once again, you're making an NFL comparison. It's two totally different paradigms. You cannot do that. The quote-unquote reality of the way the quote-unquote world works is determined by the collective bargaining agreement. That's it. Now, if these NBA owners decide that they're going to be weak and give in to these quote-unquote superstars every time they demand a trade, that's up to them. But somebody has to make a stand.
Agency. What we have available to us as AD is, I'm going to let everybody know I don't want to be traded anywhere but the Lakers.
And I'm saying to you is that's fine, good and dandy, but you got about 5 to 7 superstars.
Thank you, sir.
But over 450 players. And those owners are basically letting you know that the actions of those 7 guys, 8 guys, 10
trying
guys,
to put pressure
we're
on.
going to make sure it detrimentally, potentially, affects the other 440.
That's what ownership's been doing to labor since the beginning of
All
time.
right, and it's coming.
Go ahead, Marxist Kellerman. Put your right fist up in the air as you collect those ESPN checks.
And it's coming again.
On that note, we're here for the Super Bowl.
But anyway, that's basically it on that. Very good conversation. Stephen A. Smith has been bringing it when it comes to this issue, so I have to give him credit. Peace.